spine of California, as we're just weeks away from the Newsom recall vote. Plus, Raymond Arroyo is exposing the Democrats' homeless crisis right here in L.A. And, oh boy, reading, writing, and transgenderism. A very important message from the Biden administration later in the show. But first, Joe's secret Taliban deal. That's the focus of tonight's angle. Ever since those scenes of Biden alone at the conference table at Camp David last week, something felt weird about this entire situation. What was going on that none of Biden's top cabinet officials were with him at that pivotal time? Was it just extended alone time Biden needed with Jill? It's very odd. And when word leaked last night that Joe Biden's CIA director, William Burns, had met with a top Taliban leader on Monday, we weren't surprised. Relying on the good graces of the Taliban. Either they've cut some deal with the Taliban we don't know about, and Lord knows what we paid for that, or we're making another disastrous calculation here. Now, this raises lots of questions. First, why send the CIA director and not a State Department official? And what were the parameters of the talks? Did the CIA director push to get the August 31st deadline extended? Did he ask if any Americans were being held against their will, or did he demand their immediate release and safe passage? Well, if so, presumably he said something like that, what did we give up for that guarantee? It's hard to believe that the Taliban just did this or promised anything out of the goodness of their hearts. Come on. This entire scenario has been so fraught with lies and mishandling, misrepresentations, we frankly don't know what to think. But one thing we do know is that after making a cold political calculation, President Biden announced today that he was, in fact, bowing to the Taliban's wishes and sticking to the August 31st troop withdrawal date.
The sooner we can finish, the better. Each day of operations brings added risk to our troops. But the completion by August 31st depends upon the Taliban continuing to cooperate and allow access to the airport for those who were transporting out, and no disruptions to our operations.
It's always good to hear the President of the United States, though. It's depending on the Taliban to cooperate. Okay. Now, while the majority of Americans believe we needed to be out of Afghanistan years ago, they certainly cannot like the appearance at least, that it is the Taliban, not our president, calling the shots. It's even making Biden's biggest fans nervous.
It's not the greatest look. We've got how the Taliban says nope, and President Biden has to say nope.
You could also look at this as a tremendously humiliating moment of American humiliation, right. Forced to leave on the Taliban's clock. Well, I think history will judge this moment as a very dark period for the United States.
And as if the humiliation could not get worse, the Taliban is doing the media circuit, sounding triumphant and unmoving. Today, they announced that Afghans, they'll be staying put. They don't want them leaving the country, but that Americans should just concentrate on removing your citizens only.
We want them to evacuate all foreign nationals by August 31st, and we are not in favor of allowing Afghans to leave.
Heartbreaking, but again, to be expected. The Biden administration not only comes across as weak, but as feckless and inept, which is what happens when you elect a man who should be playing bingo with his nurse before hitting the buffet for the 4:30 p.m. senior special. And while we're talking about details and terms that are being hidden from the American people, the true scope of the refugee situation must be revealed. Importing tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of Afghans to the United States is bound to pose major challenges with huge financial, cultural, and security costs. Of course, Biden wants you to believe that he's got this whole vetting thing totally under control.
We're conducting thorough security screening in the intermediate stops they're making for anyone who is not a U.S. citizen or a lawful permanent resident of the United States. Anyone arriving in the United States will have undergone a background check.
Oh, a background check with those great Afghan files. Now, raise your hand if you trust the people behind the current border crisis here and the Afghanistan debacle to properly vet each and every one of these people. The fact is, we've already seen potential bad actors nearly slip through the system. Defense One is reporting earlier today that security screeners at the Al Quaid Air Base in Qatar have detected that at least one of the Afghans who was evacuated from Kabul has potential ties to ISIS. Oh, goody. You might say, hold on, Ingram, it's just one person caught before arriving in the United States. But here's the thing. It's not just one person. Defense One goes on to report the DOD has flagged up to 100 of the 7,000 Afghans evacuated as prospective recipients of the special immigration visas as potential matches to intel agency watch lists. Well, it's just 100. Now remember, we will likely be bringing in thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, more refugees from Afghanistan. Enough is enough. So right now, right away, the GOP has to step up. We need real oversight here, not symbolism. Our country's in danger. The GOP must press for immediate answers to the following questions. Number one, why are non-Americans being evacuated before Americans? Number two, how many Americans are likely to be left behind? What will happen to them? Number three, how many non-Americans are being brought to this country now? The real number. Is there any reason to believe that the vetting is actually being done in accordance with U.S. law? Is there any reason to believe that the vetters have any interest other than open borders? And number four, where are the non-Americans going to be settled? And do state and local officials have any say in that matter? Number five, are we paying the Taliban to stop them from attacking the airport? If so, under what legal authority are these payments being made? All of this has to be investigated immediately. Biden says now's not the time. Yes, now's the time. The GOP must also be prepared to go to court. Every American's got to get out of there, but our Constitution and our laws have to be followed every step of the way. The Biden people, as I just said, just lost that case on the stay in Mexico policy at the Supreme Court. We have to assume they're breaking the law here as well. And finally, the GOP must make clear that it will not support more defense spending until Austin, Milley, and Sullivan are all gone. Otherwise, we're just going to be throwing good money after bad. They'll start listening then. Biden's team is not going to act in good faith. There's no point in pretending otherwise. The Democrats cannot be allowed to take a crisis of their own making and then turn around and use that crisis to change or flout U.S. refugee policy. They've already tried that on the border because they turned the border into a magnet and women and babies are showing up there. It's desperate. We now have to let everybody in, even if doing so is contrary to U.S. law. No way. It's time for GOP members to do their constitutional duty to protect what's left of our laws and our national security. And that's the angle. Joining me now is former director of the National Intelligence, John Ratcliffe. John, two big issues to get with you tonight. Obviously, we're going to hit Afghanistan in a moment, but as I said just breaking moments ago from the Washington Post, the intel community is now claiming that the COVID origins probe has proven inconclusive. Your reaction to that, your old intel community, John?
Well, I'm not surprised that the Biden administration is continuing to approach this in a way that China's not the bad guy. Look, I've seen all of the intelligence up until 8 months ago when I left the office as the director of national intelligence. And all of the intelligence, Laura, what I can tell you is it's all on one side of the ledger. It all points to the origins of the Wuhan virus being from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And there's no intelligence that points to this being naturally occurring. There's no intermediary host. All of our signals intelligence, all of our human intelligence, none of it points to that this was some naturally occurring, virus. And so, unfortunately, many of us in the intelligence community that were there at the time really felt like the Wuhan Institute of Virology was more than just a probability. It was always close to a certainty, and I still feel that way having seen all of the intelligence. And if, I would hope that the Biden administration would move to declassify some of the intelligence that I think would establish that point.
Well, the current DNI, Avril Haines, she's the one who had to comment on this report. And basically, they're saying that the intel community might not have even been the best agency to do this report that it's really a question fundamentally of science. Do you agree with that, that without the scientific basis and understanding of how the genetic sequence of this virus operates, that the DNI is kind of, they're floating around a little bit on this one?
Well, I mean, I think that the scientific opinion on this is important, but I don't know any credible scientists that are still promoting the idea that this was naturally occurring. Most of the folks that have now seen the intelligence that I declassified and Mike Pompeo declassified showing, COVID-19 symptoms at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, the involvement of Chinese Communist Party officials, military officials at the Wuhan, the gene editing and, gain of function research that was taking place at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, all of the things that the CCP did to pressure the World Health Organization. Those are all things that now that they've come to light, you've seen a lot of these scientists like Dr. Fauci and others back off of saying this was naturally occurring. I'll just tell you, as a person that saw all of our U.S. intelligence, in my mind, I feel strongly that this originated at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, and I've said that publicly, and I'll continue to do that without disclosing, some of the information that forms that opinion.
It's very curious. It's very, it seems like we're giving a free pass to China. I mean, the layman's reaction tonight is that. John, moving on to Afghanistan. We heard tonight that at least one refugee has been stopped before arriving in the United States who looks like had ties to ISIS, who somehow managed to, coalesce into the group, being allowed out of the country, and is now apparently in custody. How concerned are you about this vetting process?
Well, I'm concerned about, a withdrawal that allows, essentially breathing life into radical Islamist terrorist organizations that were either obliterated or on the run at the when we left the office 8 months ago. ISIS caliphate had been destroyed. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi had been killed. Al-Qaeda had less than 200 in Afghanistan. And because of the way this withdrawal has gone so terribly, it has literally breathed life into the radicalist, the radical Islamist, terrorist organizations and groups. And frankly, I don't have confidence that this administration is in a position to vet. They can't get our own people home, much less, tell us, who's coming in connection with this botched withdrawal.
And from what you just said on the number of Americans getting out of there, John, the calculations are now that only 6.8% of the tens of thousands who have come out of the country are Americans. What about that? Is it not our priority to get American citizens out first before we start pulling everyone else out of the country?
You know what, Laura? Everyone is saying that. And I mean, Republicans and Democrats alike are saying that. Everyone is saying that except Joe Biden and his administration. Everyone is saying, let's get every American home first, and then we'll go through and assign blame for what clearly is a disaster. I mean, think about you mentioned CIA Director Burns going over to meet with the Taliban. I talked with intelligence officials today that are so demoralized that a CIA director would go over to kiss the ring of the Taliban 2 weeks out from the 20th anniversary of the most somber anniversary in recent history, when 3,000 Americans died, and the Taliban helped facilitate that. And we're sending the CIA director over there asking for their help. I mean, it's just outrageous, demoralizing, frustrating. And, Laura, I will tell you, I don't think anyone questions the resolve of the United States in the long term. But right now, everyone is questioning the resolve of the United States in the short term.
Do you think we should have resignations or firings given the calamity that is unfolding, or we should just let these people continue to wreak havoc on U.S. foreign policy and national security, John?
Absolutely, there should be accountability. I mean, if Joe Biden's current narrative
who should lose a job, John? Who should lose? Everyone talks around this issue. Who should lose his job after this calamity unfolding? Who?
Well, if someone came up with a plan, the Biden plan, that said that we're going to withdraw the military before we get our civilians out, and we're going to leave $85 billion of the best military hardware and technology for our adversaries, whoever came up with that plan ought to be the one.
It's got to be Milley, right?
Or fired.
It's got to be Milley. Milley's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and we got Lloyd Austin there as the Secretary of Defense. I mean, you got Jake Sullivan there. It looks like Doogie Howser as National Security Advisor. I'm sorry. What China's watching this, Laura, and what are they thinking?
Congress, they're thinking, what can we get done in the next 3 years before there's a strong American president? And, that's the concern. Our allies, see this nervously, and our adversaries see this gleefully. And,
it's pathetic.
Again,
it's pathetic.
A real question about America's resolve over the next 3 years. And to your point, Congress needs to be getting answers for this and get accountability for the American people. That's their job.
Former Director of National Intelligence, John Radcliffe, thank you. And as Afghanistan falls apart, the Biden administration, they want you to believe it, can prevent more U.S. gear from falling into enemy hands.
There's a strong bias to be able to get our material out with our people. If there needs to be destruction or other disposition of equipment there at Hamid Karzai International Airport, then we'll do that, and we'll do that appropriately.
Who has faith in that? In shocking new video, the Taliban, keep going, can be seen showing pictures, you see that right there, of their new state-of-the-art gear courtesy of U.S. taxpayers. Night vision goggles, body armor, Black Hawk helicopters, armored vehicles, drones. Joining me now, retired Army Colonel Doug McGregor, former Defense Secretary, Senior Advisor, American Conservative Senior Fellow. Also with me is Lara Logan, host of Lara Logan Has No Agenda. Catch the first part of the newest season, Sacrificing Afghanistan, today on FoxNation.com. Colonel McGregor, did we just fund the creation of a totally new and modern Taliban fighting force? We're going to go back retroactively and blow up stuff.
Laura, there'll be some people that will be able to use the equipment, but our experience in Afghanistan and the Middle East is that over time it all falls apart because the population can't maintain it. So I suspect that will happen. The problem is this is not unique in American military history, certainly not within the last 30 years. This is not new. And I think people should understand that if a soldier, sergeant, lieutenant, or captain lost sensitive equipment, they'd probably be facing very serious charges. But we never come back and ask the general what happened to $1 billion worth of something.
Lara, you met with the Taliban 10 years ago or so. You know what they're like. Time has gone on. Now they have some more, at least for a time, modern equipment. What do Americans need to understand tonight about the danger to the U.S. homeland and the balance that Biden was clearly making about engaging in yet another protracted military conflict?